So in case you're wondering, the air cons have tripped. Something's gone wrong. We haven't intentionally made it warm in here. Just in case you're wondering, I am going to make it much hotter though. Unintentionally. There's nothing I can do about that. I have a lot of hot air in me. As South Africans, we are quite used to irony. We enjoy a bit of irony in our humor. It's one of our character traits of our humor. Our power utility doesn't have power. We have fire stations that burn down. Police stations are robbed of guns. Irony. It defines our humor in South Africa. And today I want to speak on being crazy busy. And I've been wanting to speak on being crazy busy since early January, but I just haven't got around to it. And it's ironic and it's funny, and unfortunately it's the truth. So the series that we've been going through, Unhurried at the moment, it is not a TED talk on time management. We haven't been teaching on leading a slow, simple life, taking an obedient Sabbath and resisting crazy busyness only as a practical measure. Today is not about diary management and time management. I'm not going to teach you must put better spam filters in your email. That's not today. All of those skills are helpful. All of those skills are necessary, and you can learn them, and you must learn them to live an unhurried life with margin. But that's not what this series is about. See, you can create all of that space, but if you don't rid yourself of the curse of busyness, you can be slow and simple, you can Sabbath obediently, and all you will do is fill the space that you've created with more busyness and with more distraction. And then wonder why. See, I tried it and it didn't work. No. You just filled the space with more distraction and with more busyness. So busyness isn't only the number of things that you're doing, it's also the things that occupy your mind, that weigh on your emotions, and that constrict your spirit. So many people try to create margin for themselves, but because of busyness, that space, that margin that they try to create is automatically filled with distraction and busyness. Just because you don't work a high-powered job, just because you don't have a bunch of kids, doesn't mean that you are not busy. Many people busy themselves doing nothing. Have you heard the expression, you were busy doing nothing? What were you doing? Busy doing nothing. Busyness is not only everything that you're doing. Busyness is also what's weighing on your mind, what's weighing on your emotions. And so you can sit all day and do nothing and be busy doing nothing that day. We need to understand what is going on in the world around us and what is going on in our hearts that makes us feel this way. But it's also critical that we understand how we can change, even if it's only a little bit. And so, again, today is practical, but it's not. This is not a practical problem only. This is a deeply spiritual problem. It's diagnostic of the condition of the world, of the condition of our hearts, and how we can get from the place we are and the condition that we are to the place we want to be and in the condition that we want to be in. A man called John Comer says this: the Christian life isn't about trying harder, it's about training better. So what we've been doing over the last couple of months is not asking you to try harder. Try harder to slow down. Try harder to live a more simple life. Try harder to Sabbath better. No, we're asking you to train yourself. And we're trying to help to train you so that you can become more productive. We're training you in a way that you can live against the system of the world, a way that will lead you to living like Jesus, to being with him, so that you can become like him and do the things that he did. You might have noticed that this year we've closed every sermon with a practice, something that we've invited you to do with us, which is essentially a training exercise. If you will do the training exercise, you will live a more fruitful and abundant life. I want to encourage you, don't just come and listen to a sermon and think that was a good sermon, good couple of landing points, sounds great, tick and principle. I want to encourage you, you can't rock up on a Saturday to whatever sport you're playing. You can't rock up on Saturday to match day if you've missed Monday, Wednesday, Friday training and then just try really hard and win the World Cup. No, you've got to train. I can't rock up to run the comrades. First of all, I think it's a bad idea. But second of all, I can't rock up and just try really hard and finish a marathon. And I've got to train really hard. It's not a matter of trying harder. It's a matter of training better. Anthem Recovery, Project Exodus, this is the principle of recovery. You can't try harder to get clean. You've got to train better. So, crazy busy. 50 years or so ago, psychologists, one of the biggest problems that psychologists were concerned about was mankind was going to have too much spare time on their hands. What they were seeing coming was man had come through the Industrial Revolution, and they now felt that man was working with machine in a symbiosis. They were working together well and productively, but it was taking man was working 8 hours a day, and it was working well. What they were concerned about was technology was going to take all of that jobs that man was doing, put it on technology, and man was going to be stuck with nothing to do for 6 to 8 hours a day. That was 50 years ago. This is what psychologists were concerned was going to happen with the technological revolution. So you might be sitting there thinking, but actually the opposite has happened. Technology has made our lives busier. I want to say I don't believe it has. I don't think it's true. See, technology has done exactly what psychologists predicted it would do. It has taken a whole stack of stuff that we had to do and made it really quick. And instead of us taking advantage of that extra time it bought us, all we've done is filled it with other stuff. So technology is not the problem. How we handle technology, how we deal with technology is the problem. Technology can be the greatest gift to you. It can be a blessing if you use it correctly. And if you use it incorrectly, it will be the greatest curse to you. So are you busy? Let's look at some of the symptoms of busyness. Do you regularly work 30 minutes a day longer than your contracted hours? Has anybody ever said to you, I didn't want to trouble you because I know how busy you are? Do you regularly feel tired during the day? Do you have enough time to pray? Do you have a healthy hobby that you are actively involved in? Does your household or family eat together at least once a day? When you have time off, do you spend it thinking of all the stuff that you should have done instead of being off? Do you not get around to doing everything that you should be doing, even if you did nothing else that day? Remember, being busy is not only doing too much stuff, it's also how you fill your time and space. So if there was nothing on your to-do list today, and there needed to be something and you didn't do it, at the end of the day, you've spent the entire day busy doing nothing. Busyness is the problem. So if you're identifying with one of those symptoms, or like me, many, you are busy. And my educated guess, is that most of us are actually chronically busy. Again, not only doing too much, but sometimes crazy busy doing nothing. So we said that being busy is both a practical and a spiritual problem. So there's a physical danger to being busy. We all know people who are heavily medicated, who have heart problems, weight problems, anxiety issues, stress issues, depression issues, constant distraction issues, relational issues, etc. Of course, busyness isn't the only cause of all of these, but I can promise you, if you spend a prolonged time chronically busy, one or more of these physical symptoms will begin to manifest in your body. But the biggest danger with busyness is not that massive physical danger. The biggest problem, the biggest danger with busyness is a spiritual problem. Busyness does three things to us spiritually. It ruins our joy, it robs our heart, and it covers up the rot in our souls. Busyness, first of all, ruins our joy, because I've observed that people who are chronically busy have no time for deep joy. And people with no time for deep joy settle for cheap joy. That's often how addiction starts. No time for deep joy, and so we settle for cheap joy. Busyness will quickly ruin your joy. Rich used the word last week when he taught on Sabbath. The word was delight. Some of you might not even have heard that word delight. You would have seen it as a margarine in Checkers, delight. Maybe that's what he's talking about. So delight is a feeling that comes through prolonged times of deep joy. As I go through prolonged joy, prolonged times of deep joy, the feeling that I experience is a feeling of delight. And for so many of us, delight is beyond us because we don't have time for times of deep joy. And with no time for deep joy, we settle for cheap joy which does not bring and never allows us to feel delight. Joy is a fruit that takes time to cultivate and grow. Secondly, busyness robs our hearts. Jesus teaches in the parable of the sower about the person who hears his word, and the seed takes root in his heart, but then it's choked up by the weeds and dies. And his disciples in Mark chapter 4 ask him, Jesus, what does the parable mean? And he says two things. They say, what are the weeds? He says there's two things. The cares of the world and the desire for other things. The cares of the world and the desire for other things. Most people don't abandon their faith. I know very few people who have said, you know what, I'm done with Christianity. I know some, but I know very few. For most people, the cares and the worries of life, our busyness and our stresses, simply choke the life out of our hearts. We have more to think about than we are able to think about in a moment, and so we forget things. And so to stop forgetting things, we get diaries and calendars, but instead of using them to ensure that we don't do too much, we use them to help us do more than we were created to do, efficiently. The worries and cares of life. The second weed that Jesus speaks about is its relative, the desire for other things. The other things are not bad. It's everything that we have to do to take care of those things and everything that we have to do to get more of those things that is the problem. Statistically, the most stressed out people on the planet live in the most affluent countries, not in the poorest countries. Busyness causes us to numb our hearts to feeling any pain. And when we are numb to pain, we also numb to joy and love and peace and all the other fruits of the Spirit that can only be produced in us by taking time to cultivate fruit. The third thing that busyness does is it covers up the rot in our souls. I know that's a little bit of a jarring statement. Most people have not thought about themselves as having rot in their souls. I get that. About this time last year, one of my sons played a rugby game, and he came home with a roasty on his arm. And about a week later, he came to me and said, Dad, my elbow doesn't bend anymore. I'm stuck in this position. It's really sore, and it's stuck in that position. So I started trying to work out what was wrong. No, he hadn't taken a hit. He hadn't over-exercised. Nothing happened. He says, it's a bit weird. And then he said, and also, this thing is not looking so great. And so I looked at it, and it was that nice greeny gray color. You know that green-gray color that's, you know that color? If you leave your beef not in the fridge, it goes that color. And there was red lines going from it up into his elbow. He said, it's not so great. I said, well, the problem is there was little pieces of grass in it. A week later, he hadn't cleaned it. It was beginning to rot. He had thought to himself, it was only a graze. It was a small wound. And so to clean it, it's going to be sore. I'm not going to clean it. I'm just going to leave it because it was only a small wound, and now it was beginning to rot. It had impaired, his arm couldn't move. If we had left that for another week or two, we would likely have had to amputate his arm. So it was quite a process for us to and a bit more painful for us to clean that sore. Friends, sometimes we think to ourselves, it's okay, it's just a small wound. All of us have been wounded somewhere and somehow. We think to ourselves, it's a small wound, it doesn't need to be cleaned. But what happens is that infection starts to get in. And there are parts of our internal beings, there are parts of our souls where rot is setting in and has already set in. And we're wondering, why am I not as mobile as I used to be? No, well, there's a little bit of rot that's set in your soul. Busyness is a bandage that we place over these wounds so that we don't have to clean them. Tim Keller says that one of the greatest dangers with busyness is that there are even greater dangers that we don't have time to consider. Busyness causes us to be busy. The danger with it is it causes us to ignore other problems that are even more dangerous. Unprocessed wounds begin to rot, and that busyness covers them up without us ever dealing with them. What is busyness a substitute for in your life? See, whatever you have substituted for busyness is not where the rot in your soul will start. It's where the rot in your soul is already setting in. Instead of dealing with the stuff that we should, we just cover it with busyness and hope it'll get better by itself. It's really quiet in here. Is it the aircon? That's all right. That's all right. So each of you listening to this, can immediately bring to your mind something that you know you need to address urgently in your life, but instead of addressing it, you've covered it with busyness. You've bandaged it with busyness. And remember, it's sometimes busy doing nothing. So why do we do that? Why do we busy ourselves? Why do we resist slowness and simplicity and Sabbath and rest? One of my favorite authors, a man called C.S. Lewis, says this: it's not that we doubt that God has good for us, it's that we fear how painful the good will be. It's not that we doubt that Sabbath and rest and slow and simple is good for us. It's not that we think that busy is good for us. It's that we fear what not being busy will cost us. We fear what not being busy will force us to face and confront and feel. Friends, I can promise you, it's worth it. So if those are the symptoms of busyness and those are the dangers of busyness, what's the diagnosis? What's the root cause of this problem? Things are not the way that they should be because we are not the way that we should be. Which means that our understanding of busyness must start with the father of all sins, pride. The root of busyness is pride. Pride is subtle and it changes shape often. But there's far more of it at work in our hearts than we know, and far more of it driving our busyness than we realize. Pride is an enemy with 1,000 faces. It's just when you think you've fought it once, it comes up in another way with another face, wearing a different mask in a different place, and you think it's something different, but when you trace it back to where did it actually come from, it's the root of it is pride. One of the faces that pride takes is that everything is up to me. If I don't do it, produce it, earn it, then it won't be done. I loved what Rich was saying last week about the Sabbath. Why does the Sabbath start with rest? Because it reminds me that it's not up to me, it's up to God. And then, after 8 hours of sleep, I get to wake and join God in the work. It doesn't start with me. It doesn't start with my effort. It's not born out of my cleverness and my efforts and my strength. No, it's born out of my rest in God, and then I get to work hard. It starts while I'm sleeping. I'm unable to produce anything while I'm sleeping other than a bit of noise, according to my wife. But John, you don't understand. I have to be this busy. I need to provide, and I need to keep up, and I need to leave an inheritance. Friends, do you not think I struggle with those exact same fears? I have 5 children who are all sporty and all busy. Of course, I struggle with that. Of course, it weighs on me. My life is ripe to be under the curse of busyness. But I have to live a life from a place of rest, that it's not up to me. It's in God's hands to provide and keep my family. And then, after 8 hours, I get to wake and then partner with Him in His work. It doesn't start with me. I do work at it, but it doesn't start with me. Pride takes what was supposed to be a blessing and it turns it into a curse. And consider hosting people in our homes. The Bible speaks of hospitality as a gift. So hospitality, a gift should bless both the giver and the receiver because it's more blessed to give than to receive. So a gift should bless the giver and the receiver. Hospitality is a gift, so it should be a blessing. But for how many people does hospitality become about them? For how many people does hospitality become this massive stress of I need to get my house right and I'm worried about what my house looks like and I'm worried about what food I'm going to feed them and I'm worried about what my kids and my pets are going to behave like when the people are there and I'm worried about what these people are going to think of me when they're in my home. And so pride takes something that was supposed to be a blessing and it turns it into a curse. And so having people in our homes actually becomes a curse to us instead of the blessing that it was intended to be. Friends, that's not rooted in wanting to give a gift. That's rooted, if we are honest with ourselves, it's rooted in pride. People-pleasing is rooted in pride. It will take something that is supposed to be a blessing and turn it into a curse. Pride will also take work that should be a blessing and turn that work into a curse. But John, I still live in a world that has lots to do. I still live a full life that needs to be productive, and my boss isn't chill with me, just vibing on the beach all day. There's stuff that other people are relying on me to get done. Friends, today isn't a sermon. I said it's not a TED talk about how do you manage your diary better, but it's also not a sermon about we all need to become monks in monasteries. It's not that. We are all called to live productive, fruitful lives. But we're also called to be free from the curse of busyness. So how do we tell the difference between people-pleasing, prideful work and genuine hard work and service to others? can start by asking yourself this question. Does what I'm doing or does what I'm wanting to do good, or does it just make me look good? Does it do good, or does it just make me look good? See, saying yes to something will always look like the former, but it is very often about the latter. Doing something will always appear as if I'm doing good. But when I scratch the surface a little bit, I actually find out it's actually about me looking good, making me look good. It always looks like the former, and it's very often about the latter. I'll give you an example. When I was in grade 11 at school, we suddenly had these guys called PFPs. Do you know what a PFP is? Pushing for prefect. So suddenly the most rotten guys, the guys who had done nothing for 3.5 years, were bringing the teachers apples and picking up litter in the garden because there was 3 months till prefect confirmation. It looks like on the outside, them doing good. Picking up litter is good. I can say, I'm doing good. Picking up litter, bringing an apple, serving my teacher, it's a good thing. But if I scratch the surface a little bit deeper, it's actually about making me look good, which is rooted in pride, not in doing a good work. So we're speaking about how can I know the difference between good, fruitful, productive work that God has called me to, working hard, and busy work. It either makes me look good, which is prideful, busy work, or it does good. I'm sure you would have heard the saying, we spend money we don't have to buy things we don't need to impress people that we don't even like. You would have heard that. But why do we do that? To make ourselves look good. Friends, that's busy work. The root of busyness is pride. Genesis chapter 2 says this in verse 15. The Lord God took the man, Adam, and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. This is before sin is into the world. We get a picture, and all humankind has a mandate from God. As God puts Adam in the garden, he says to work it and to take care of it. So we inherit that same mandate to work it and to take care of it. This is where we get I'm going to say a big word, a theology of work. This is how we should understand God wants work to look. He says part of Adam's purpose is to work hard, but there's a subtle difference between working hard and being busy, and the difference is what it produces in us and through us. One of them is literally life, and one of them is literally death. So the word translated as work it here is the word abad. It's used 260 odd times in the Bible, and of those 260 odd times, it's translated as work 5 times, and it's translated as serve 226 times. It means work and it means serve, but it's overwhelmingly translated in the scriptures as serve. The word translated as take care of it is the word shamar, and it means to hedge in, to protect it, to attend it. Remember, this is where we get our mandate of work from. One of the first examples of mankind working is as a gardener. So we always speak about Jesus the carpenter, but before we have Jesus the carpenter, we have Adam the gardener. Gardening is hard work. It's physical, because when you leave gardens alone, they don't get better by themselves. They get worse by themselves. It takes hard work. A garden has to be patiently and diligently tended and worked. You have to protect it from weeds and pests, to shelter it from too much or not enough sunlight. You have to water it and turn the soil. This is the picture that's painted in Genesis chapter 2 of hard work. But here's the key. It's productive work because it produces fruit. Work that God has called you to do is productive. It will produce something of worth, not only a salary. It will produce fruit and it will produce life. In Genesis chapter 3, sin enters the world and creation is put under a curse. It says this in verse 17 of Genesis chapter 3. Cursed is the ground because of you, your sin. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food. The active word here is istabain, and it means worry, labor, pain, sorrow, toil, by the sweat of your brow. So the work that is done under the curse is busy work. But it's also unproductive work. It produces far less than the work done under the blessing. And so Under the curse, we work harder with more pain, more sorrow, more anxiety, more busyness. And not only that, but we also produce less. Where can I sign up for that kind of work, please? Work in worse conditions, harder, and produce less. Work under the curse. Friends, is your work productive? Does your work produce something? Or is it just a never-ending bunch of tasks that never actually produce anything? Do you just tick boxes and tasks? I'm not talking about wealth creation. Of course, you must provide and build something in your business. But what our work is supposed to produce is something of eternal value. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves don't break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." If all that your work produces is earthly, then it will be destroyed at some point. All of your wealth accumulation, you can generate generational wealth. You can put it in the most well-protected and well-structured trust that you want. You can be wealthy for 50 generations, 100 generations if you want. It will perish. It doesn't matter how long it lasts on earth. It is still temporal. It is still earthly. It is still not eternal. Jesus' invitation to us is for our work to produce eternal treasures. Because his warning to us is, where your treasure is, there your heart will follow. So if your treasure is in producing earthly treasures, then that's where your heart will be in the earth. He says, your treasure doesn't follow where your heart is. Your heart follows where your treasure is. So if your treasure is in producing something that is temporal and earthly, even if it's generational, that's where your heart's going to be. But if your treasure is in producing something that is eternal, that has eternal value, that is of the kingdom, that's where your heart will follow, Jesus says. See, the type of person that you are becoming has eternal consequences. If that's where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be. I said earlier that I wanted to preach on busyness since January, and the reason for that is I was recognizing some of the symptoms of busyness in my life that I didn't want to accept. Too many people complain about busyness, but they never do anything about it. Friends, we have no right to complain about the things that we tolerate. If you tolerate busyness in your life, you have no right to complain about it. I couldn't accept what busyness was producing in me earlier this year, especially after we had worked so hard to put rhythms in our lives. I could have kept on going. I could have kept on saying yes, and I could have kept on doing everything that I was doing, but I couldn't have done that and become the type of man that I want to become. And so I chose that which is eternal. You see, becoming the type of man that I want to be is an eternal treasure. And in an amazing twist of fate that we call grace, it actually makes me more productive. As I become a better, more faithful follower of Jesus, so I become a better, more faithful worker, a better husband, a better father, a better friend. Becoming a better follower of Jesus frees me from the prideful curse of busyness, and my work becomes productive service, tending and protecting a garden and not generating weeds and thistles by the sweat of my brow. We tend to think that we have to do two things: become a better follower of Jesus and become a harder worker. No, friends. If we do one, we will get both. But if we do the other, we will get neither. It's not about doing two things, becoming a better follower of Jesus and becoming a harder worker. It's about doing one properly so that we get both. Because if we chase after the other, we will get neither. I want to close with a scripture in Luke chapter 10, a story. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. Another translation says she was distracted by many things. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to work all by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset by many things." One of the other translations says you are anxious and troubled by many things. The Message translation says you are fussing too much. You're getting worked up over nothing. You are very busy, but not with what matters most. Then he says in verse 42, Jesus says, few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better. That word better there is made up of two words, good and portion. Good implies benefit, is of benefit, and portion implies a measurement, a good measure. So she has chosen to participate in a beneficial portion. Mary has chosen to participate in a good measure, and it will not be taken away from her. So in the same chapter, Luke tells three different stories. Luke chapter 10 tells three stories. It starts off with Jesus commissioning the 70 disciples, and he sends them out. He says, preach the gospel, heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons. Then it goes on to the story of the Good Samaritan, and the major themes in the Good Samaritan are doing the work of mercy and justice. And then Luke chapter 10 closes with the story of Mary and Martha, and it starts off with Martha, who is busy and distracted with many things, fussing over a bunch of things, busy with, but not with the thing that she should be busy with. And it ends with Mary, who chose the good portion, who chose the good measure, who chose to participate in what was beneficial to her. Some scholars suggest that Luke groups these together as one narrative in his writing on purpose, to say that you can do the good work of preaching the gospel. You can heal the sick. You can raise the dead. You can cast out demons. You can do the work of mercy and justice. You can busy yourself with getting your home ready, all the stuff that you have to do. But if you have not sat at Jesus' feet, you have not chosen the good portion. A man called Kevin de Jong says this: it's not wrong to feel tired or overwhelmed or to go through a season of chaos. What is wrong, what is heartbreakingly foolish and wonderfully avoidable, is to live a life with more busyness than we want because we have less of Jesus than we need. The key word, one of the key words to this story of Mary and Martha is found in verse 38. It says Martha was distracted. What Martha was doing wasn't bad. She had Jesus in her home and she wanted to host. She was preparing food. She was getting crockery and cutlery. The work that she was doing was not bad. The distraction was bad. Remember, hard work is not a problem. This story is not an invitation for all of us to just sit cross-legged at Jesus' feet all day while everybody else works. This is not what this story is an invitation to. The problem is that we are distracted by too much busyness, and we don't have enough of Jesus in our lives. This story is an invitation to not be distracted by busyness rooted in pride, but to take time and sit with Jesus so that we can produce good works and not dead works. See, outside of Mary sitting with Jesus, the work that Martha was doing, which was all necessary work, the work that the Good Samaritan did, which is all necessary work, and the work that the 70 disciples were all commissioned to do, that's all work. Outside of sitting with Jesus, that's all dead works. Outside of being with Jesus, preaching the gospel, doing the work of mercy and justice, hosting people in your homes is a dead work, not a good work. If you are not with Jesus, there is no fruit in it. It produces nothing. That's what this story is an invitation to. Friends, the life that you want is actually the life that you need. We all want to live a life that is more measured, more good portioned, more productive, free from the curse of busyness, so that our work will result in an eternal treasure and not only an earthly treasure. So if this is what you would like, here's the one step that I'm inviting you. Here's the training session that I'm inviting you to on Wednesday afternoon this week. Read a book. It might sound like a very simple step. And I'm asking you to read a book, not because any one book other than the Bible will change your life immediately, but because you can only read when you make time to read. So I listen to a lot of podcasts and some audiobooks, and I listen to them on 1.5 speed. You can listen to audiobooks on 2 times speed, right? And you can listen to them while you're driving in the car on the way to work with a bunch of kids in the back seat, and you're over the speed limit because you're running late to work that you're already behind in. And you can fool yourself saying, I listened to the podcast, I listened to the audiobook at 2 times speed. It didn't take anything in. But you can only ever read a book when you make the time to read a book. So I'm asking you this week to make the time to read a book. We're going to send you a book. I'm not going to ask you to find a book. We are going to send you a book through the church app, on the church WhatsApp. It is a very short book. if you make a little bit of time, it's 8 pages long. That's how short it is. If you will make time, this book is not going to be a magic bullet that will magically take away all your busyness and all of your problems and make your work productive, but making the time to read it is a good place to start. Jack spoke last week about changing from a finite to an infinite mindset and of doing a busyness inventory. Rich spoke about taking a Sabbath, not just a day off. This is in addition to all of the practices that we've been inviting you to every week, not because we thought it was a clever place to land our sermon, but because we don't want you to try harder to be a good follower of Jesus. We want you to train better. I want to invite you again to not just listen and appreciate an okay sermon with a really good landing point, but I want to invite you to put it into practice. Because if you will do that, if you will come to the training sessions on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, by the time the game comes on Saturday, you will be a better player. If you will practice, if you will train yourself in a spiritual life, you will be a better follower of Jesus. You can't try harder, you've just got to train better. This is an invitation to you. Remember, you don't have the right to complain about the things that you tolerate. And so if you are tolerating busyness, anxiety, and stress in your life, and also wondering why you are not growing spiritually, it's in your hands to do something about it. If your elbow is not bending, and you're wondering why there's a sore here and my elbow is not bending, not realizing that those two things are connected, it's within your hands to do something about it. You can't save yourself, only Jesus can do that. But you can change the way that you live. I want to invite you to do that. Can you stand with me, please, friends?